Okay, so I finally managed to generate a world that I like. It's called Kar Unol, which means the dimension of soul in the language, or whatever language that is. So we're gonna go ahead and use the up and down arrow keys and select Adventure Mode. So that's gonna load up. It's gonna take a little bit. Okay, so the first screen you're gonna see is the list of races you can play as. Now, there's three good races. Well, I shouldn't say good. There's three races that you can play as that aren't driven by evil, I guess you could say. Goblins and kobolds. They just kind of do their own thing. They're usually seen as being evil. These guys, elves, humans, and dwarves, all really depend on what their culture, their in-game culture is based on, whether or not they're evil. So, quick overview of the races. You use the arrow keys again to select what race and what civ you want to be. So for example here, there's two types of elves we can be. This just means that it's coming from two different nations. They're still the same thing, pretty much. They might have different access to metals if they're dwarves or humans. Again, your list is going to be a lot bigger than mine because you have very high civilization. So here we go. Typically, humans are going to be your best bet because they are actually the biggest in terms of size, which just means that they're going to be the best warriors. It's as simple as that. They don't start with steel like dwarves possibly can. They typically have silver and bronze, maybe iron, so you have to be wary of that. They're not going to have the best types of metals. Human civilizations typically made up of hamlets and towns, which are above ground settlements. And usually these guys are the best. So for our first character, we're going to roll a human, but just to go over them, elves. They're bigger than dwarves, I should say. I shouldn't say taller. Bigger than dwarves, but smaller than humans. They typically just start off with wooden weapons, so they're not really good, and they also never get attacked by animals. So that's kind of the good thing with elves. But like I said, because they start off with wooden weapons and equipment, they're not too good. Dwarves start off with metal. You have a pretty decent chance of starting off with steel, if you're lucky. You'll usually start with silver or iron weapons as a dwarf, so that is always a benefit as well. But yeah, and then human outsider, you are going to start off completely naked with the only abilities of knife user and spear user, so typically just play as a human of a civilization. Okay, so the second status is actually called status of your character is going to be whether or not he's a peasant, a hero, or a demigod. Now these three options determine how many points you can put into your stats and your abilities. So for your first character, you're obviously going to want to go with demigod because that is the highest amount of abilities and stats you can put into. So go ahead and select demigod and hit the enter key. By the way, with the status, you hit minus key to select, to go back, or the plus key plus shift to go through this menu. So minus key or shift and then plus. So that's how you do that. So go ahead and select demigod. And then we get to this screen. So the first thing you're going to see is the starting attributes. So because adventure mode has a lot of fighting, you want to boost the stats that are going to be involved to fighting. So you're going to want superior strength. That is the best. That's the strongest you can be. It'll make sure you hit everything really hard. Agility should be fairly high too, either above average or high. We'll put it up to high. This will let you dodge better and things like that. Toughness and endurance. Well, toughness, it determines on like how tough your character is going to be. So what that really means is whether or not he can take a hit without just passing out. So usually, high toughness is fairly good. Same thing with endurance. It determines whether or not your character will pass out from like pain or if he's overexerted. So usually you want that on high. Now for these, you usually just keep them on average until you get to analytical ability. This is pretty useless in adventure mode, and then so is creativity. Patience is fairly useless too. Linguistic ability is fairly useless, and then social awareness is fairly useless too. The only things you want to have kind of up there, well, first of all, willpower will also kind of help you stay alive, essentially. It's another thing where if your character is going in through a lot of pain, he can survive because he has high willpower. He won't pass out or anything like that. Excuse me, I meant social awareness is actually fairly important. It's what lets you have more party members, so you want that to be above average. I was talking about musicality, which is fairly useless. So you can just have low musicality because your character is not going to be running around playing the lute or whatever. This isn't Fable, it's a little bit more important. Kinesthetic sense is how well your character moves. So, like, if you're climbing or if you're swimming, that's usually a plus to have, so go ahead and boost that to above average. And just looking at this, spatial sense is also very important in combat. It determines how your character is going to affect... it determines like how your character moves in combat, so spatial sense is fairly useful. It just kind of helps with combat skills in general. And just for the heck of it, let's boost focus to above average. That helps with archery, observer, and ambusher, which are all skills which will prevent you from basically being ambushed if you're sleeping at night. There is a nice adventure mode quick start guide which I'm following. This is really good. I'll also post this link in the description, but just in case you want a little video tutorial, because you know reading is difficult nowadays, so we can just do this. Now for your weapon skills, you can pretty much pick whatever melee weapon you want to do. We're not going to go with bowman or crossbowman because range combat isn't really great when it's just one person and you come up... basically think about it like an RPG. If you're an archer and you come up against 6 melee enemies, you're pretty much going to get your shit pushed in. So swordsman, maceman, axeman, hammerman, pikeman, spearman, those are all good. Lasher uses a whip, so if you want to be Indiana Jones, you can do that. We're going to go with axeman, personally. We're going to boost that all the way up to proficient. Again, I'm just looking off the wiki. You're going to want adequate observer too. That just helps you not die if you're sleeping or anything like that. We can put 1 point into swimmer just so we don't drown if we ever have to cross a river, or if we're on a frozen surface and it unfreezes. Shield and armor user, you can boost. The guide says to boost it to proficient. Go ahead and boost shield user to talented and armor user to proficient. That one can be proficient. Shield user can be talented. Shield user will let you block attacks, which is really important. Armor user will just, like, if you get hit in like the body, like if you can't block something and you get hit in the body, usually that's what'll that's when armor user comes into play. Dodger, if you're not dodging attacks, you're blocking them. So again, the wiki is telling you to put it to proficient. You can just put it onto competent or adequate. I'm just going to leave it on adequate, just because if we're going to be blocking a lot of attacks, we don't really need to be dodging. Now there are some attacks you cannot block, like grabs from monsters, so be wary of that. You might only have the option to dodge certain attacks. We're going to put a point into reader because you cannot level up reading naturally, and if you want to become a necromancer or something, you need reader. And just for laughs, we're going to put 1 point into thrower, because sometimes you might need a ranged weapon, and thrower will let you do that. Again, that isn't something the wiki recommends, but it's something I like to do. So once this is all ready, you hit enter, and then it'll come to this screen. So this is your backstory, your race, or not your race. Well, yeah, it says your race, but also your gender and then your name. So we're going to be a human male, just because I prefer to be male. And then it'll tell you your backstory. So you can change this as much as you want to. Now for you guys, because I don't have this option, you're going to have an option right here underneath background that says locally important or peasant. Keep hitting the plus and minus key until, or keep hitting the plus key until it says locally important. That'll be very important for when it comes to being able to recruit followers. So we're just, and the gods, they don't really matter in this game. They don't really do anything past world gen, so you can just keep hitting the plus keys. But we'll be the god, we'll be a worshipper of the god of poetry, writing, scholarship, and wisdom, and we'll just keep, oops, And then well, you can hit C to customize your name. You can hit R to make a random name. So we'll just hit R a couple times till we get a nice name. Asri Fortunone, sure. And then you just hit go. You hit enter and go. And the game might take a while, but you can see you'll start in your house, and you can see there's actually a lot of equipment in this house. So just to check out your equipment first, you hit I to see what you have. So you can see we got water, we got pretty much just cloth clothes, and then a bronze great axe and a bronze shield. So I'm going to leave this section off for now, and then I'll catch you soon with being able to manage your inventory and getting your first quest.